Hello, everyone, and welcome back to NeuroAlchemy, the brain body healing podcast. This is the space where science meets soul and where we explore healing as a multi-dimensional journey. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Young. And I am a doctor of integrative and natural medicine. And much of my work centers on helping people reconnect the dots between their brain, their body, and their overall health and well-being, as well as uncovering the deeper layers of identity and meaning that shape how we live every moment of our lives. And one of the intentions of this podcast is to slow our conversations down just enough that those complex ideas become accessible and tangible and hopefully actionable as well. Because when things feel confusing or overwhelming, clarity creates safety. And when the nervous system feels safe, it's much easier for people to reflect, to grow, make changes, and heal. Today, we're exploring something incredibly fundamental to the human experience, our relationship with our own emotions. And in particular, how many people lose access to parts of their emotional life over time. Our guest today is Dr. Gloria K. Vanderhorst, a psychologist who spent nearly 50 years working with individuals and families across the lifespan. Her work draws from emotional-focused therapy and internal family systems, two approaches that help people reconnect parts of themselves that may have been hidden, suppressed, or wounded earlier in life. She is also the author of the book Read, Reflect, Respond, the 3 R's of Growth and Change, which guides readers through a process of self-reflection and personal insight. And she is currently working on a book focused on raising boys with emotional intelligence and helping men reconnect with the full range of their emotional experience. Dr. Vanderhorst, welcome. We are so glad to have you here today on NeuroAlchemy.
I am delighted to be here and really looking forward to this conversation.
Before we dive in, I always like to just start with a gentle arrival. How are you arriving today, either physically or emotionally or energetically?
I'm arriving with a lot of energy and emotionally excited. I love talking about this topic. I want everybody to know this. So I will shout it from the rooftops as long as I can.
That's so wonderful, and we need more of that. We need more of you. So, are you teaching in your space yet?
So I am doing therapy, and therapy is a teaching process, right? It is helping people to discover what their strengths are and to learn how their history jumps into the present and actually undermines them. Sometimes your history can be helpful, but frequently your history can create a roadblock for you.
You've spent nearly 5 decades working with people across many stages of life, preschoolers, adolescents, adults, even couples, and I imagine that gives you a very unique perspective on human development. I'm curious, what initially drew you into psychology and into working so closely with emotional development?
Oh, that's a great story. I grew up loving math and I wanted to be a math teacher. And I challenged myself to finish college in 3 years and to finish with a 4.0 with straight A's. Not a simple goal, a pretty difficult goal. And in my um, second year, I ran into a new teacher for Calculus 2. She faced the blackboard, never turned around to talk to the class. She spoke to the blackboard, wrote with her right hand, erased with her left, and just filled the front blackboard, filled the side blackboard, went back to the front. I mean, it was like impossible to learn Calculus 2. And everyone was struggling. I had to go home for Christmas break, take a bus home. I sent a friend to check the professor's door to see what grade I got. She came running across the parking lot screaming, "You got a D! You got a D!" And I went, "Yes, I passed. I don't have to take it again." So, but it ruined my 4.0, of course, right? Tanked that right away. And as a result, over Christmas break, I decided to flip my major and my minor, right? I wasn't going to be a math teacher. My minor was psychology. I took psychology because it was fun, right? Because I enjoyed it, because it engaged me. It just stimulated my curiosity. And honestly, I've never looked back. So it's true that life circumstances can smack you in the face and cause you to take a turn in life. But many times that turn can be quite positive, could be the path that you were supposed to be on in the first place.
That's really important for people to hear. I'm sure there's people out there going through things that
Mhm.
it just seems like the change is so intimidating, right?
Right.
And it's so important to point out that often it's those pivotal moments that create our next steps.
They do.
What stands out to me when I hear about careers like this is that when someone spends decades observing human patterns, they start to see the deeper themes that repeat across generations.
Absolutely. And it's very interesting that we know now through research that we do keep generational experiences and information. All right. We have genetic material in our brains from past generations. So not only does the previous generation or two pass on traditions, they actually pass on memories. I have a great example of that if I could share it with you. I worked with a woman who, as a child, 8, 9 years of age, would periodically have a nightmare that woke her up in the middle of the night. She was absolutely terrified. And her nightmare was of being chased by a group of men with guns, right? Like very bizarre. Why would an 8 or 9 year old have that nightmare? But it repeated enough that it became a real concern. Where is this coming from? Her grandparents, who were from overseas, came to visit, and the family is talking about this. And her grandmother went silent, just absolutely silent. And as they pursued, what is this about? The grandmother told a story of when she was a child that the family ran from a group of invaders, right? And that was the nightmare that this little girl kept having. So genetic material does pass from one generation to the next. And it's hard to believe, right, that your brain would present this scene to a little girl, but they discovered that it was an accurate story from past history.
You mentioned that much of your work incorporates emotion focused therapy. For listeners who might not be familiar with that term, can you help us understand what that means?
Yes, both emotion focused therapy and internal family systems recognize what I have just described, that you hold on to all of the life experiences that you have had from infancy forward. Technically, we know that you hold on to experiences from the last trimester in utero, right? Because your brain is functioning. When your mother talks to you in that last trimester, or your father talks to you, or they put headphones on mother's belly, you are creating memories for that fetus. And so we store all of this information. So it's reasonable to understand that if we store it, our brain has access to all of the history that we have experienced, that we can, with the proper tools, actually unbox those things. find them in the storage unit of your brain. And both internal family systems and emotion focused therapy recognize the power of early experiences and how they can jump into the present. And when you uncover the significance of an early experience, like the little girl that I just described, you can release the tension that that experience is causing. It's the emotion focused therapy was originally designed to work with couples and to help couples take a deeper dive into their own emotional histories and understand how interaction with their spouse would trigger an earlier experience. And that early experience jumping into the present would cause them to behave in a way that was distressing to the other person. And so once you can uncover those, and talk with each other about them, they've now been modified in some way that should bring closer connection between the two people. And that's what that process is about, is bringing closer connection between husband and wife.
And even in neuroscience, we relate to emotions not just as psychological experiences, but also, biological signals that influence memory, attention, and even how the brain itself organizes meaning. So
Right,
I think, learning to understand emotions rather than just suppressing them, right? Which is what we're kind of conditioned to do often
right.
in society as we are growing up in the world around us. It's got to be incredibly powerful.
It's very powerful. If you think about it, infants come into the world with emotional intelligence that is at the genius level. It's their survival mechanism. They can't talk, they can't walk, they can't move around on their own. They need a survival mechanism. And their survival mechanism is their emotional intelligence. I tell people, if you're thinking about developing a business and you're considering going into business with some of your relatives, bring them all into a room, find a baby, pass a baby around the room. In the arms of the person that is trustworthy, the baby will be comfortable and relaxed. In the arms of the person who's kind of skeptical about going into business with you, the baby will start to fidget and make a little bit of noise. In the arms of the relative that's going to take advantage of you and deep six your business, the baby will start to cry. That baby has just read the room. Babies are perfect at reading emotional intelligence, the emotional intent or tone of a person. And too often, when a baby is in a social situation, people will misread that signal. They will think, oh, the baby's hungry, or, the baby needs to be changed. Wrong, right? The baby is giving you truthful information about the trustworthiness of the person that's paying attention to the baby. So you can use that productively, right? Maybe Aunt Sally isn't as safe of a babysitter as she says she is.
I think one of the reasons this work just can resonate with so many people is that it acknowledges that we all have these different, parts of ourselves, the protected parts, the vulnerable parts, the parts that really want to grow. And healing often involves bringing those parts back together in relationship with each other.
Absolutely. That's what internal family systems is all about, is understanding that you have multiple parts to your character and that they all are purposeful. None of those parts are wasted in any way. They are all purposeful, they're all intentional, and they've been developed over time as a result of interactions with other people. So, as you understand how those parts were treated, how they developed the particular characteristic that they have, then you can understand how you function. I have a great example, all right? And it is my personal example. For the longest time, as a child, as an adult, I had this caution in social situations. I was not the one that would go up and introduce myself. I would wait for people to come to me. And I did not feel comfortable with lengthy, elaborate conversations. And it was like, I don't know why that is. Maybe I'm just shy. And then when my mother was in the last couple of years of her life, she decided to tell more stories about her own life experience. And one of her stories was the story of my birth. And at my birth, in the when my mother had me, we didn't have fancy hospitals. Women went into labor and they just stayed in labor as long as it took. It took 2 days for my mother, right? It was a very long time to be in labor. And when I was born, she did not see me because she was exhausted. So they whisk her away to rest. They whisk me away because I have a physical problem. I am born with an open spine. And so nobody tells my mother this. The next day in the maternity ward, right? Big room, lots of beds for mothers, curtains that just separate the beds, and they bring the babies in. They pass all the babies out, and my mother unwraps me and sees this wound on my back, and she starts screaming. And I mean, screaming at the top of her lungs. She's screaming for the doctor, she's screaming for the nurse. Now, think about that, right? I'm a baby, I'm a newborn baby. And my first interaction with her is terror. It's terror. Right? So, of course, I'm going to be cautious about introducing myself to new people. That's the root of that cautiousness. Well, once I understood that and had that story in my head, it's like, hey, let me in the room. I'll talk to anybody. All of that cautiousness just like melted away. So that's evidence, right? That all of our early experience is truly important and it does shape the way that we function in the world around us.
It's absolutely positively imperative from my perspective to really get to know yourself, right? I mean, and I don't just mean like at the thought level, but when you
Right.
really dive into even like epigenetics and how your genes work and you realize, oh my gosh, I judged myself for all these years over whatever this trait or problem or, whatever. And as it turns out, it's just, I'm perfect the way I am. It's just a variation of being a human being on the planet, right? And the more that we can see that and work with that and uncover that, like you were just saying, the more empathy, compassion we can have for ourselves as well as for,
Yeah,
the
it
world around
changes you.
us.
Right. It changes you and it helps you appreciate that when you see particular personality characteristics of other people, it has a history. It has a root to it. And if you can find the root, then you can choose whether you want to hold on to that plant or you want to pull it up by the roots and experience something else.
One of the topics you're currently exploring in your writing is how boys are often raised to disconnect from their emotional lives. And I love that you said earlier that, you'd like to shout from the rooftops because I think this is just a topic that isn't addressed enough, isn't talked
Right.
about enough, and it has profound implications later in adulthood. Can you talk a little bit more about what happens when boys grow up without permission to feel the full range of their emotions?
So there are two things that I think are critical. One is that we know that boys are born with a broader range of emotional expression than little girls have. I'm going to say that again, right? Boys actually come into the world with the capability of having a broader range of emotional expression. So they can go higher, they could be more intense with exuberance and excitement. They can go lower with irritation and anger and frustration than little girls can. But by and large, boys are raised by women. And so when the infant goes high, mother has a natural reaction to that. It's strange for her, right? She's not expecting that or anticipating that. And so, she might scrunch up her face, she might withdraw a little bit, she might turn to the side. She gives a signal of, I don't get that. I don't like that. What's that about? And I said earlier, infants are brilliant. Their only survival mechanism is reading the room, understanding the emotion in the room. And so the boy will immediately shut down that degree of expression. He wants to stay connected to mother or the caretaker, and most caretakers are women. That is changing. There are more men staying home now raising children, but by and large, the caretaker is female. And so the boy, as an infant, really restricts the emotional range of expression, cuts himself off from those, what we're going to call extra feeling states, from the broader range that he's born with. And then when they start to walk, the culture does something that I think is just really cruel to do to a human being. We tell boys that they are not to cry. They are not to have soft, tender emotions. They should not be interested in the doll corner in preschool. We definitely don't want them in the kitchen, even though most famous chefs are male eventually. We still, at preschool, we don't want them in the kitchen. They cannot play in the doll corner. All right. They are to play with blocks and soldiers and trucks. We restrict the range of emotional intelligence that they can access. And then as adults, we're shocked that they cannot develop intimate relationships with another adult. Well, we should not be shocked, right? We have trained them to cut off access to tenderness, to softness, to engagement, to reciprocity, right? We've limited their emotional experience. And then suddenly we expect that they could access that, magically turn it back on. They can't. That's why the divorce rate is 50% or more. And that's why jails are full of men, not women, because we have denied them access to their feeling states.
And it's such an important topic because, many of the men that we see struggling with relationships, communication, emotional regulation, they just weren't ever given the language nor the permission to experience those emotions early in life.
I'm glad you mentioned language because I want to encourage everyone to go to my website and download the feeling sheet. There's a feeling sheet. You can go across the menu at the top and find resources. There's a feeling sheet under resources. I think it's 4 pages long, 3 or 4 columns on each page of feeling words, positive ones, negative ones. Download that, print it out, put a copy in the kitchen, put a copy in the space where you watch television or play games, put a copy in the bedroom. And when your children or you are struggling to express what you're feeling, just scan through the feeling sheet. Your brain holds on to everything. It has not lost access to any of those feelings. And automatically, the feeling experience that you are having will just jump off the page. And there, voila, you have a new language to describe what that feeling is in your body. And you've just expanded your vocabulary for expressing yourself. And you're helping your children expand their vocabularies for expressing themselves. So it's an essential element for every household.
You mentioned in your intake form that you hope listeners will begin a journey of self discovery by identifying those lost feeling states. And that phrase really stood out to me. When someone loses access to certain emotions, what does that actually look like internally? And how do people begin reconnecting with those parts of themselves?
It looks like frustration, right? I am having a feeling, and feelings get expressed in our bodies, right? It's not just a thought, they get expressed in our bodies. So I'm having a feeling, but if I cannot label it, right? As a human being, language is very important to us. We love to talk. You and I are talking now. We're enjoying that, right? Human beings love to talk. We want to be connected with another person through language. And so our bodies hold all of this feeling information. If I cannot put a word to it, I'm going to swallow it, right? And it's going to manifest in some kind of pain or discomfort in my body. If I can put a word to it, I own it, right? And it is not going to sit in my body. One of the reasons that men die younger than women is that we don't give them access to their feelings. All right. So those feelings get housed in their bodies. They have heart attacks, they have diabetes, right? They have all kinds of distress in their bodies break down at younger ages than women because women get permission to talk about their feelings and they enjoy talking about their feelings. But men are told, oh, that's sissy, right? You're not supposed to do that. But it's actually a health issue. Identify what you're feeling, expand your feeling vocabulary.
Your book invites readers to read, reflect, and respond. Reflection can sometimes feel uncomfortable because it invites us to look honestly at our past experiences. Why do you think reflection is such a powerful catalyst for change?
Because that is how we learn and understand the world around us. We have an experience, right? We put it into our brain and it gets connected with other experiences, right? You might think of it like a vegetable soup, right? You could put anything in there and it's going to blend with everything else that's in there. This journal book is different from the majority because majority of journal books have lines and they expect you to write responses. In this journal book, the facing page is blank. There's an essay on one side, a blank page on the other. The blank page has a couple of questions at the top, but it enables you to access things in your brain that are not stored as language, right? Remember, we come into the world, we don't have language. All right. And we spend 3 to 3.5, 4 years without access to a lot of language. So all of those early memories are stored in other ways. They're stored in terms of action or pictures. And that's true for the rest of our lives, right? We store things in terms of action or pictures. I'm great at the picture part, right? I could be introduced to someone, name and face. I will remember their face. I will lose their name completely, right? But I can pull their face up any old time I want. And so the journal book gives you access to these other ways that your brain has stored information. You can draw, you can scribble, you could tear the page if you want. You have to tape it back together to read the essay on the other side. But if that's what comes out of you, honor it. All right. Do it because that's giving you excellent feedback that you can now go take a deeper dive into that reaction to the particular essay. So it's a growth experience to work through this journal book.
Well, I love the multidimensionality of it. I'm all about the multidimensions of being a human being, or
Very
rather, being a soul, having the human experience, right? In brain science, we often say that awareness precedes change. And when someone becomes aware of a pattern, the brain can begin creating new possibilities.
absolutely. Absolutely. Right. That's my example from infancy. Awareness of that fear just, was gone. Gone in 30 seconds.
Before we close, we always end our conversations with something we call a micro practice invitation. It's not a big assignment, it's not anything overwhelming, just a
Hmm.
small practice that our listeners could explore during the week ahead. Dr. Vanderhorst, what might be a simple reflection or question or practice that you might want our listeners to sit with this week to reconnect with those parts of themselves?
So I would encourage people actually to reconnect with the important people in their lives by finding 10 to 15 minutes to engage that person and just share daily experiences, not problems, right? But things that you have seen, things that you have felt, or things that you have thought. So if you saw a woodpecker outside your window while you were eating breakfast, I want you to share that with your spouse because we were born connected. We thrive in connection. And you would be shocked at the number of couples that do not connect with each other in the course of the day, the week, the year. Lots of time goes by and they are isolated from each other. So that would be my advice. Find a human being to connect to.
I feel like part of that is our society has kind of trained us that when we're with somebody, there's some type of thing we're supposed to do, right?
That's right.
It's like a
Right.
doing culture. And we've almost forgot about the concept of what my daughter and I like to call we like to share space. And
Right.
when we say, like, hey, I want to share space with you, that means we don't need to plan to go out to dinner. We don't need to like make it a big wahoo, but let's
Right.
just be in the same space at the same time and
Right, it's
share.
being, it's being,
Yes, that's it. So that
not doing, it's
invitation,
being.
that's it. So that invitation for all of you out there, remember that the encouragement here is the opportunity for you to be present and share space with the people that you love. And those are the most important people of all.
Right.
If somebody listening today is struggling with emotional disconnection or feeling lost inside of their own experience, what are you hoping that they can most remember about themselves after hearing our conversation today?
That their brain is brilliant. They have access to healing. It's just sitting up there waiting for you to go exploring. So take the risk, go exploring.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your wisdom with us today. Conversations like this remind us that emotional awareness is not weakness. It's
Mhm.
one of the foundations of being deeply and fully human. And to everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us together today. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider sharing it, liking it, subscribing to the podcast. That's how these conversations travel and reach the people that need to hear them the most. I'm Dr. Sarah Young, and this is NeuroAlchemy. Until next time, remember this: you are not broken, you are becoming. Bye for now.